All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Aleta Williams, I'm so excited to have you here for our Trachtenberg Tips video series. Trachtenberg is a mouthful. Um,
Say
and
that, say that 5 times real fast.
that's right. That's great. But we're so excited to have you here talking about some tips for the job search process. And let's start off, though, with having you introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do. Then we'll move into questions.
Sure. Well, Melissa, thanks for the invitation and thanks for this conversation. As you mentioned, my name is Aleta Williams, and I am the Managing Director of GOPA Group US. It is a engineering and consulting firm made up of many different companies, and I am the Managing Director of our US company. We work in the international development sector in about 95 countries all over the world. I have worked in international development. It's been a huge honor and privilege to do the type of work that I do for well over 25 years. But I've been in this role for about one year in May. But I've worked in London. I was a senior education advisor for USAID, for Sub-Saharan Africa, education advisor, worked for 2 presidential White House initiatives while at USAID. So I've spent a lot of time working all over the world, trying to promote better access to quality education and healthcare, etc. So happy to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Wonderful. And with a career like that and still going strong, I imagine you've had lots of experience with the questions that I'm going to be asking. So let's get started. What is the best networking advice you've received?
I would have to say that Sarah Moten, the late Sarah Moten, Dr. Sarah Moten, who was my mentor, when I first joined USAID, it was the first time I was working for a large bureaucracy. And Sarah knew that I had worked in many different, organizations for a major global consultancy, came with a really rich network, very diverse network. But that once you get inside the bubble, there is a tendency to be very inward looking. So one of the things that she said to me is to not lose your network and in fact grow it. And then she reminded me that I am a public servant, and that the taxpayers pay my salary. So I should be very responsive to external engagement. And I think that served me well. I think it helped to fuel my sort of natural instincts to be a connector of people with ideas, with resources, with other partners. And so I'm really grateful for that reminder. And I often share that tip with others. So I would say networks are important, relationships are important, and you should be constantly looking to grow, not only for your own self, but in service of others.
Wonderful. Terrific advice. Thank you. So thinking back on any of the searches that you've done, what specific actions have you taken that have significantly impacted any of those searches?
Well, I decided early in my career not to search,
Okay.
and to really try to understand myself and my purpose in life. And I have a philosophy that every job is an interview for the next job. So the demonstration effect is real. Staying in a place long enough to have a track record is important. And that you want to be able to really develop those relationships, have the track record, demonstrate, what you are able to bring, so that when people are in rooms in which you are not, they will say your name. And I think that served me well. I can't even remember the last time I actively searched for a job. The last thing I'll say is always take a call from a headhunter, even if you're not looking. It's a great way to sort of develop that relationship, to get in their database, and they actually will do the work for you. So
Excellent.
two tips of advice.
Excellent. So I'm going to play with this question a little bit. I'm going to ask what you found most helpful in preparing for an interview, but also maybe what you really value when you are doing interviewing of other people and can tell that they've done in preparation?
Well, I do think it's important to do your research, know your interviewers, know the organization, know the industry that you work in, the trends, et cetera, and be able to sort of bring that into that engagement. But I do think that the most important thing is to know yourself. Know who you are, know what you bring, know what you want, and remember that you're also interviewing them. Um, I have a really dear friend who, again, gave some really great advice, and I have probably used this philosophy more often than, more recently, more often, in that she said, when I congratulated her on a new job, she said, I don't work for XYZ. She said, I work through them. And so this whole notion that you are on this earth to do something, that you can decide and you can really sort of focus on, what value and what contributions you want to bring, and that the jobs become part of that that story, that journey, right? And so this whole notion that you don't work for, you work through, and that your raison d'etre, your purpose in life, is much bigger than one isolated job. So I like to think of it that way. And then when I'm interviewing, I like people who are authentic, um, who are challenging, who are equally interviewing us as we are interviewing them, who ask really good questions, who demonstrate a really good understanding of the organization, the role, but more importantly, are just comfortable in their own skin and really clear about what value they can bring and what their expectations are for success in the role.
I'm definitely going to be thinking about working through instead of working for. That's going to be at least one takeaway from this. There's certainly others as well. Okay, so thinking back, we were talking before I hit the record button about when you graduated, and it was it was back when I did, and
We
so
won't say the year.
we won't need to say the and programs change over time too. But thinking back to maybe skills projects, maybe capstone, how did you use those tools either on your resume or just when you were talking to people to demonstrate, your skill and experience?
Well, I had to go back and even remember what my capstone was. But I will tell you that part of my intrigue with the program was to be able to understand organizations, and how they develop, how to optimize them, how to make them more efficient, effective. Um, and and so that was the sort of pull for me. So whether or not, working for a for-profit consultancy or a nonprofit organization, really just trying to better understand how they function. And the one thing that I think I've come to understand is the importance of culture, and that, culture eats strategy every day and in every way, 24/7. And really taking the time to understand organizational culture, not what's on the website and what's on paper, but how things actually function, understanding the people, understanding the culture, understanding how values are demonstrated through behaviors, etc. And I do strongly believe in that sort of more nuanced approach, which is much more difficult than developing a really a really sort of compelling strategy. That's wonderful, but the reality is that the cultural piece, which many people don't want to, find it difficult to address, is so critically important. And taking the time to understand that when you start a new place, or, as organizations evolve, really just taking stock and really taking the time to be observant, to listen, to learn, to try to understand, is so critical.
Do you think that this is not on my list of questions, so
Sure.
forgive me, but do you think that talking with people who are at an organization when you're considering working there, applying there, interviewing there is a good idea? Does that give you some better insight into the culture than doing just the research of websites and articles and posts and such?
It can, but again, you have to be mindful of who you're talking to.
Mhm.
That people come with their own biases, their own experiences. And so I think having a diversity of perspectives of people who are currently, people who have left,
Mm.
you know, um, you know, Glassdoor is great, but people don't tend to write positive things on
Right.
Glassdoor. They usually, and so I think again, having sort of a balance of perspectives is really critical.
That's great. And one of
Yeah,
the things since we graduated, me not from Trachtenberg, but in that period of time is we have, grown and grown and grown an alumni base. So often we can even find alums who fit a very diverse
absolutely.
perspective. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So our last question, formal question, because I've snuck a couple
Uh-huh.
in. What specific action have you taken that you think's been the most impactful on your career in general?
Um, well, I hire good people. Um, so I hire good people and then I get out of their way. I provide cover if cover is needed. I clear the sort of path, ahead if that's what's needed. Um, and I let them get on doing what they do best. Hire people who are smarter than you, who complement you, who will challenge you, who have different perspectives and experiences. Diversity matters, but inclusion is also equally important. Um, and, to be generous with grace and recognition. And that is not only for others, but also for yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that, that has served me well. I've been very fortunate in being able to be in positions in which I'm able to bring others along and creating, environments in which people can thrive, do good work, enjoy being in that space, have a common sense of purpose. And so that for me is, you know, life affirming and necessary. Um, so I think it's really important for you to understand yourself and what you bring, what's missing, what you might not have, what you need, and in those gaps, fill those gaps up with just fabulous people. But I think it's important then to let them do what they do best, and then to recognize and appreciate them. But again, appreciate yourself.
I love that. And what a great note, what a great note to close on. Thank you so much for all of your tips and your insight. And I think that sometimes students feel they need to kind of twist themselves into a pretzel to fit a job. And that's not the message you're giving here, which I love.
No, absolutely not. I often say, I mean, the important thing about leadership, and I often say, to younger people who I, have hired, I need you to be great because someday I'm gonna be working for you. And so I approach it that way. I really truly believe that, um, I have interns who are now my clients.
Mm.
Um, and I really believe that relationships matter. Nina Simone, I believe it's Nina Simone because I've been quoting it and saying it's Nina Simone. No, Maya Angelou, sorry. Maya Angelou said, people do not always remember what you said or what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
And then in the words of the philosopher and poet Snoop Dogg, um, you need to also be generous with yourself. He has a pretty funny video of him accepting an award on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And he starts by saying, I want to thank me for being me. Thank yourself.
Love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to thank you for a terrific conversation. And we are grateful.
And I am grateful. I had such a wonderful experience there and always happy to participate in anything that you see fit for me.
Thank you
So
so much.
thank you for inviting me to have this conversation.